Sometimes the antidote to a struggling team is to get to beat up on a similarly struggling team. The Jets will have that chance against the Buffalo Sabres on the road. Will it fix everything? Probably not, but it might make us feel better for one night.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. More than anything, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, we're going to be taking a little bit of a step back. First, we're going to chat about Winnipeg versus Buffalo, which is a chance for the Jets to right their wrongs and get things back on track, and then maybe take a bit of a brief look about a quarter of the way through at how the rest of the NHL is doing. The standings so far are a little bit weird, and I've talked a lot about not really having a clear picture of who is among the NHL's elite this year. And so far, I don't know that we really have that much more clarity, but we're seeing a couple of teams that I think have risen to the proverbial top of the pile. We'll chat about that in just a brief moment, but before we go any further, just wanted to let you know that tonight's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started right now. Now, the Jets have been limping along recently. It's no secret that Winnipeg has fallen fairly well short of their usual standards, and I think, a lot of it probably has been, just a really stupid schedule. The Jets over the last 13 to 14 games have had some really insane travel. So that's definitely had an impact. Injuries are starting to take their toll. Sandberg, Ehlers, Scheifele at 70%, or maybe even not that at some intervals. It's been not a great time. You sort of expect the Jets to face adversity at some point, but Winnipeg really hasn't been able to respond in its usually impressive way. They're 3-7 in their last 10 games. They got kind of the brakes beaten off of them by the Blues. Maybe that's not quite as fair of an assessment, but the Jets, yeah, they were not good. The last few weeks have been, the Jets basically just trying to survive until they finally get some home games, but then they finally do get a home game and they got embarrassed on home ice. So, yeah, the Jets are looking for some kind of a reset. And sometimes the best way to do that is to face another team that maybe isn't doing that well. Enter the Buffalo Sabres. Now, Buffalo's recent record is a little bit better than the Jets. I think they're 4-5-1 in their last 10. But you look at this team, and quite honestly, I'm surprised that they've been this bad. The Sabres are hovering towards the bottom of the Atlantic. Now, we'll specifically talk about, standings updates a little bit later, but I look at the roster and I'm a little shocked that this team has had such a bad start. Up front, you've got Zucker, Thompson, and Tuck, and then on your second line, Benson, Cousins, and Peterka. Your third line is Kulich, McLeod, and Quinn, and your fourth line is Valenstein, Krebs, and Aube-Kubel. Now, looking at this forward lineup, it looks on paper pretty good. The problem is that not every piece here has been going according to plan. Kulich, one of the young rookies, has not exactly been lighting the world on fire. Cousins has also been going through his own recent rough stretch. Dylan is one of those players that I think is probably going to be fine in the long term, but they're paying him a lot of money to be their 2C, and he really hasn't been able to live up to particularly impressive numbers this year. Their big acquisition, Ryan McLeod, who is a very good player. Obviously, McLeod was brought in from Edmonton, very fun guy, but he's kind of like your consummate middle six center, right? He's not a guy who's going to be a huge difference maker. Will he be a better NHLer than Matthew Savoy? Maybe. There's a reasonable chance of that, but in terms of fixing what's gone wrong for Buffalo, doesn't really seem to have had that much of an impact. On the blue line, you kind of look at this team, and again, you think it shouldn't be that bad. Dahlin and Byram anchor your first pairing. Power and Yokoharu on your second, and Bryson and Clifton on your third. Now, the blue line is a little vulnerable, and Dahlin has had some injuries, a little bit of day-to-day stuff, But on the whole, this team should be relatively fun to watch, right? The Atlantic Division isn't exactly a powerhouse, and so you would think to yourself that surely this Sabres team has to be doing pretty okay. But you look at their record this year, yeah, they are 11, 12, and 2. So if you look at the underlying numbers, it's been rough. The PK has not been good. The special teams have struggled. At even strength, they are not generating much offense. They're giving up a lot of opportunities. It's not been a great start to the season. The goaltending, has not really been able to bail them out. Luukkonen and Reimer are getting lit up. And it just seems like every game I see the Sabres doing something really embarrassing. Last night they were playing against Colorado, and I think they had a 4-1 or a 4-0 lead. And yeah, they blew it. They lost 5-4, and they lost in regulation to the Avs. The Avs have not exactly been clean themselves. I mean, Georgiev was embarrassingly terrible, but then somehow the Sabres managed to equal or if even exceed the level of badness in net. So, yeah, Buffalo, I think, has a lot of soul searching to do. And if you're the Jets, this is a great opportunity to get back on track. But I think for Winnipeg, I'm sort of wondering what lines the Jets are going to go with. I think my recent frustration with Arneal and what I'm really annoyed by is that when you finally change something up, the Jets then go back to the same lines. When things aren't working, they go back to the same combination. Connor, Scheifele, Velarde, they always seem to turn to. You went back to Perfetti, Nemesnikov, and Lambert, and that's your usual in steadfast group. But instead of Lambert, you could have Ehlers if it was a fully healthy roster. And I just don't get it, right? I'd rather the Jets try different things and struggle than struggle with the lineups that we know don't work. The top line of Connor, Scheifele, and Velarde has not been getting it done. Maybe they had a little bit more pep in their step after a bit of reading the riot act to them in the locker room. But I mean, it didn't really do anything. The Jets still got their butts kicked, and it wasn't like they were that much better in the third period. So from Arneal, I just want him to be a little more patient with it. I know that he has to change things to try and get a spark, but I feel like consistently he turns to the wrong things to try and solve this. It wasn't like this at the start of the year. I felt like he was a little more flexible in some areas than I thought he would be. But now, when he makes changes, he just doesn't really seem to stick with it. And I get it. Some of the lines yesterday were really bad. I mean, the team itself just looked very slow. I don't know that it was necessarily a problem with the lines so much as they just seemingly ran out of steam. So I don't know that putting all the lines back to the way that they were really made all that much sense. It didn't win the game, and it's not like the Jets played considerably better once all of the old line combos were reunited. So I'd like him to try that line setup that he had at the start of the game for the first two periods one more time. If it really doesn't work, okay, I'm willing to entertain the idea of going back to something else. But Perfetti, Lambert, and Velarde had a couple of really good shifts together, and I thought that after that, I would have liked to have seen more of them. I know that the second period wasn't great, but the whole game just wasn't great. So look through the weeds, look through the mess, see if you can find some sparks, and just sort of take the broader context that the Jets are definitely playing down. They are tired. They're running out of steam. And I don't think that it was just the lines that were a problem, with the ones that they started the game with. I think fatigue and some of Winnipeg's own 5v5 struggles and some of the tactical choices of being really aggressive at the blue line have definitely been starting to show up against their opponents, right? The Jets are getting pieced apart by teams using stretch passes, rapid counters, and stuff. And this is not exactly stuff that's new. So hopefully the coaching staff maybe rethinks some of their adjustments and gets a little creative. I don't want them to suddenly abandon the idea of making changes just because you have a rough stretch and maybe your first set of changes don't work. We know that the old version wasn't working either. So don't, just go back to that time and time again. But I won't be shocked if we see Hanel a bench somehow. I wouldn't be shocked if we see Connor, Scheifele, and Velarde again. And I'm going to be a little bit annoyed if it works. I just feel like that teaches the wrong lessons for this team. Unless this whole original lineup goes and goes on some 20-game hot streak, I just have a feeling I know where it ends up. It's starting to show a lot of consistency and trends from stuff that was a problem last year, and I'd like Winnipeg to at least be willing to be a bit more open-minded. I don't want to sit here and say that I want to watch them lose with creative new lines because losing sucks, but at least it'd be different than watching them lose with the same thing that they've already done. If nothing else, it's just at least a bit of a different spark, I guess, a different look. So we'll see what the Jets do. Obviously, Arneal's going to try and, I guess, extract lemonade from a rock at this point, but surely this team can beat the Sabres, right? I'm really hoping that's the case. A loss to Buffalo, and I feel like you have a little bit of soul searching to do. But, I mean, it is what it is. Plenty of teams go through bad stretches. The Jets are not exempt from this. So we'll just have to see what happens. But obviously, around the league this year, it's been strange to look at some of the standings. We'll chat about what particularly stands out for both the Eastern and Western conferences in just a brief moment. But before we go any further, I want to let you know about our friends and partners at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. If you're watching a game, say one of the Ravens games, or perhaps you're a Commanders fan, a lot of you I think are Vikings fans and you're watching this great defense of theirs, maybe you're getting a hunch about Darnold finally going on a hot streak. Well, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're placing your bets. Maybe this is the time to back up your Darnold beliefs and suspicions with some actual data. The only way you can do that, though, is by visiting FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's only at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Hey friends, welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are just chatting about some frustrations with Winnipeg recently, but it is what it is. At the end of the day, we all live and move on, even if the Jets win or lose. Some of us maybe, have a little bit more of a frustration and a tougher time with it, but at the end of the day, hockey, I guess it's only a game. Why do you have to be mad, right? But there are probably a lot of fans out there who are not happy with their teams as well right now. The Eastern and Western conferences have been a little strange, to put it lightly. Out in the East, I'm struggling to figure out which of these teams is truly good because you look at the standings and you look at the way that some of these teams play, and you do not think that they should be as high in the standings as they are. Let's start with the Bizarro Atlantic. This division has to be made up. There's just no way that this division is actually real. Why? Well, it's being led by the Toronto Maple Leafs right now. They're in first place with 34 points, followed by the Panthers and somehow the Bruins. This is the really strange one. Boston has been not very good this year. The offense has not been great. Swayman has kind of been bad. They're blowing loads of chances, just constantly giving up high danger and quality left and right. And I feel like this is a team that if there's a squad that I expect to either barely make the playoffs and get bounced in the first round or just not make it, period, it's got to be Boston. And part of the reason for that is right behind them with like 5 games in hand is Tampa Bay. The Lightning are actually pretty decent. They've been a little more modest in their last 10 games, but this is a Tampa team that I think still has a lot of talent. Offensively, I think they're at least better than the Bruins, and I have to think that they will probably get into that third playoff spot in the Atlantic at some point. I would also expect, Toronto and Florida to remain at or near the top. They're both really good teams. It is a little strange to see Toronto leading the division, but overall, it seems like maybe Berube has figured out something. The fan base seems a little happier with them recently, and so maybe they've got that great balance. I don't know. But they're just a perennially good team, and then the playoffs happen, and maybe they win a round or two, but eventually something craps out. We all know that Toronto making the second round is usually like a real milestone moment for them. So, hey, maybe they actually win a second round this time. At the bottom of the division is where things get a little bit bleaker for their fan bases. You've got the Sabres, the Wings, Ottawa, and Montreal, and you just have to imagine that none of these teams really seem to have their stuff figured out. Now, the Sens might be the strangest because, by all accounts, the Sens actually play pretty decent hockey, but they have a really awful PK. The goaltending has not been good. Omar is, starting to put things together, but like, I don't know. The Sens just seem cursed to not be good. I think there must be some stricture where they are legally not allowed to win that many games. It's a shame because there's a decent team there that on paper looks solid, but it just seems like somehow every year something just holds them back from being competent. I don't know what it is. I don't know if there is some Ottawa curse that is just laid upon this franchise, but I don't know. I don't know what you even do with that team at this point. I feel like all of the on-ice underlying metrics look really strong, barring a couple of problem areas that I think are fixable, but those problem areas seem to be burying all of the good that the team does. So, yeah, not a great time to be a Sens fan, but probably a better time than the Habs fans are having. Now, I will say for Montreal, they were expecting to tank. That's probably not that surprising. I don't know if they expected it to be this bad. They've conceded 94 goals already, which is quite a bit. There's only a few teams that have conceded more, like Pittsburgh and Colorado has been pretty leaky. But if you're Montreal, I mean, I guess the good news is Laine is back. He did score in his first game back, which was really great to see. I wish he was doing it in a different jersey, but I will certainly just be happy for him all the same. It was a great moment, really touching. And on a night when, you also had Columbus and Calgary playing, and really cherishing and celebrating the moments, memories of the Gaudreaus. It was just a nice feel good moment for a couple of teams out there. And for Laine, who's gone through his own issues recently, it was nice to see him finally take the ice and do that really nasty wrister that we're all used to. Man, he can pick a corner like you would not believe. And I really wish that there had been some sort of a way for the Jets to actually fit him and make it work. But it is what it is. Can't really cry over spilled milk, and that chapter is, probably closed for good on the Jets, and maybe it's all for the best. Now, out in the Metro, technically this is the much stronger division between the two, and I think it's pretty easy to see why. At the top, though, you're not going to believe who's in first place in the Metro. It's Washington. Not only are they first in the Metro, but they are first in the conference. They are, I guess, good. I don't know. When I watch them, I tend to find that they're defensively vulnerable, but they just seemingly haven't slowed down offensively. They're scoring lots of goals. I know that they did lose in overtime the other night, but overall, this Caps team is 17-6-2. They seem to be producing consistently with Strome, Protas, and a few others. Miroshnichenko just joined the team and looks to be a really good draft pick. And, it's kind of easy to root for him given some of his health struggles. But yeah, I don't know. I keep feeling like the bubble will burst at some point with this team, and so far it really hasn't. So maybe it'll take the playoffs, but I don't know. Maybe the Caps are just really legit. I'm still trying to figure out if I believe in them, but a couple of their players I definitely 100% believe in. They're a sneaky team, and it seems like maybe they also have some decent goaltending for once. So hey, all the power to them. Behind them are the Devils. New Jersey is a fun team. This is a really offensively ambitious squad. Finally getting a few extra saves here and there. Still conceded a fair few number of goals, but not that bad considering some of their previous seasons. And offensively, they just shoot the lights out. The only thing that they're not going to love is that they have more games played than most of the division. Only Pittsburgh has played nearly as many as the Devils have. So at some point, the games in hand may become a little bit of a problem, but overall, this Devils team is still very strong. It seems like they're finding, their rhythm recently, and with Hughes and Hischier and company just still clicking along. This is a team that doesn't have too many concerns right now, outside of maybe some of their middle six players not quite performing up to standard, but they've seemingly fixed Meyer, so that's probably a real positive for them. And I think that at this point, the Devils are really just trying to make it through on a deep playoff run. That continues to be a little bit elusive for them. Maybe not this year. Then you've got the Canes, and the Canes are just good. Like I say that every year, defensively strong, offensively good. There's really nothing super surprising about it. But the team that's behind them, I think, is the bigger story. It's the Rangers. The Rangers are falling apart. They're having their own version of the Jets collapse that we usually have in the January and beyond months, and it seems like they are preparing for a big sell-off. Now, they've talked a bit about trading Trouba at some point. I have no idea how that would even work. Trouba would only make sense for Winnipeg if he wanted to return at a really cheap deal, and I don't really see the benefit unless Pionk goes the other way. And even then, it's like doesn't really feel like you gain much, but whatever. I'm sure he'll get traded or something, or at least have the captaincy stripped. Whatever it is, though, this team is going to go through a makeover, and I'm sure Winnipeg will be keeping an eye on guys like Keandre Miller, Philip Hedl, and maybe one or two others. But I don't know if the Jets are going to be willing to give up what the Rangers probably want in a bit of a retool. At the bottom of the division, not super surprising here, you've got the Flyers, Penguins, Blue Jackets, and Islanders. What is kind of interesting is that they've all got roughly the same amount of points, between 25 and 27. Same with the Rangers. 4 through 8 are only separated by 2 points. So there's like a lot of like not good play here, but they're not objective, like they're not abjectly disgustingly awful. This division just seems to be generally pretty deep. Even the worst teams have generally done well. Like this, the Blue Jackets are above 500. So this is not a division that I think you can really take lightly. But the same can probably be said about some of the Western Conference squads, right? The West has been a little hard to figure out this year. The Jets went on their magical run, and then things have kind of cooled off. In the meantime, guess who's in first in not only the Central, but also the whole league? It's the Minnesota Wild. So the more you try to understand hockey, the less sense it starts to make. We'll chat about what's going on in the West and what it means for the Jets in just a brief moment. Before we go any further, though, thought we would shout out our friends and partners at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports available to everyone. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. If you're wondering why you should make PrizePicks your primary choice, it's because they always put their members first. So all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. And when your picks hit, you could get your money in as little as 15 minutes. They even offer Venmo for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals from your account. And if you're, if you've got like a lineup that maybe isn't perfect, no problem. They've invented the flex play, which means that you can still cash out even if one of your picks doesn't hit. And of course, they're available in over 30 states in the U.S., including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. So for a lot of you stateside listeners, probably a really good opportunity to get in on some of the hot action, especially because you get a $50 bonus instantly when you play $5 at signup. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's just guaranteed. I think for the Sabres game, I know that I've had issues and reservations about giving some predictions for point scoring recently. It's been a little dry. I think the Nemesnikov line, maybe Nemesnikov gets over half a point. I would say the same for Morrissey. That feels like a pretty safe bet. Hopefully they do. I'm tired of watching the Jets not score goals. It's not been fun. But the only way that you can even do this is to download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Hey friends, welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we're just wrapping up a little bit. Obviously, we've talked about the Eastern Conference a bit. Now it's time to focus a little on the West. This, obviously, we have more familiarity with because we're Jets fans and we watch how the West just continues to be an absolute mess. The Central, it couldn't be more confusing. At the top, you've got Minnesota, Winnipeg, and Dallas. And like on paper, it maybe doesn't seem super shocking, but the Wild being first in the league is probably of huge annoyance to everyone else. More specifically, the Jets. Minnesota also beat us the other day, which was kind of irritating. They sort of embarrassed us. Didn't love that. It was a closer game in the latter half, but still Minnesota ended up getting biased. And I think, obviously Jets probably not going to relish that one long in the memory. But Winnipeg, that was the 4-1 win. Winnipeg did beat Minnesota the other day. I am getting some of my games mixed up here. it's the Blues and Stars that have embarrassed us recently, but like Minnesota being one of the only wins recently is actually really funny. We lost to pretty much the rest of the Central Division, but we beat Minnesota. That game, what I remember was it was fairly tight, but then the Jets managed to squeak a couple of quick goals in, and Minnesota just seemingly got hellebucked that game. So it seems like Minnesota is like a pretty legit team this year. I feel like, there's a lot more speed from this team than I expected. That second game that they played where it was, sure, a decisive victory on the score sheet, it felt like Minnesota really outpaced the Jets by a good bit. And that's going to be a theme going forward. That's probably why I said Minnesota sort of embarrassed the Jets, had memories of that, is because they really did outskate us that night. Hellebuck was really the deciding factor. But against other teams, Minnesota really hasn't had that issue. They don't score loads of goals, but they also don't concede a lot. Gustafsson is one of the only other goalies right now putting up similar numbers to Helly. I think Hellebuck still has the inside track on the Vezina, but Gustafsson's going to be a finalist. He's been great for them, seemingly really panning out. And you kind of wonder if maybe Ottawa gave up too early on Gus. I know that their goaltending rotation has sort of been, up and down, but, he seems like he's really found a home with the Wild, which is going to suck for us because they've also got Volstead coming down the pipe. So, yeah, not fun for the Jets if you have to think about who we've got to shoot against. Now, Dallas in third is interesting. I mean, the Stars play good hockey, and they did beat us the other night. Didn't feel like an insanely huge margin of victory. I think the scoreline maybe flattered the Jets slightly, but I just felt like it was not like a crazy impressive win. But they're a good team. They've always been a good team. They are perennial playoff contenders at this point. Curious to know if they actually like bust the hump and get through more than a couple of rounds this time. Their real big goal is to get back to the conference finals and everything and beyond that. But it just seems like it's been a little bit of an up and down struggle, especially with Robertson being a little bit quieter recently. So I think they'll be fine, though, in the postseason. Really good team. I guess the one that maybe people didn't expect to have as many issues as they have is Colorado, but they've had a nightmare season, right? Whether it's the goaltending or the injuries, some of the suspensions, it's just not been a great season for Colorado. Even still, they're only like 4 points behind Dallas right now. Yes, they've played more games, but we all know that if Colorado does get healthy and finally figures out the goaltending stuff, which they did trade away Annunen for a backup recently, so Wedgwood. So I mean, maybe this will fix it. I don't know. Wedgwood, pitched a shutout of sorts, and that's how they beat the Sabres the other night after Georgiev just absolutely crapped the bed. But I don't know. Colorado is just one of those teams that, like, even though they're bad right now, I just don't want to face them in the playoffs. Like, I just have flashbacks to last year. Winnipeg embarrassed them right before the playoffs, and then Colorado then walked over the Jets in the postseason. The style of play that they have is not one that I want to see in the postseason. So let's hope that we don't see Winnipeg. The Blues, I know that they're behind Colorado, but like now that they've got Montgomery, I would be worried about them. They are fast. They are playing strong hockey recently. I wouldn't look too much at their current record. I think that this team has the makings of a real pain in the butt under Jim. Montgomery was really good with the Bruins until this season, and I don't think what happened with Boston is really a reflection of him. I think what he's going to do with the Blues, with a team that's already got some talent to work with, it's going to be a problem for the rest of the Central. So keep an eye on them throughout the rest of the season. After that, you've got Utah, Nashville, and Chicago. I think Nashville's last victory was against Winnipeg. They're 7-13-6. I don't even know what you do with this team, man. Like, they are just... not much to say about them other than I think it's probably time to start tearing it down. So good luck to the Preds on that one. Out in the Pacific, things are not as clear-cut as you would think either. You've got Vegas, LA, Vancouver, and Calgary all within 5 points of each other at the top. It's close, man. Vancouver and Calgary are neck and neck. No one expected the Canucks to or the Flames to be this close to a playoff spot, and I don't think people were expecting Vancouver to take this big of a step back. Vancouver, though, I mean, even with their recent struggles, they're still 13-7-4. I think people talk about them as like a really bad team. I think they're good. I think that the last year's shooting percentage was not sustainable. It led to a great run to the playoffs, but I think some of the defensive issues that they have maybe have been a little more visible. They're missing Demko as well for much of this year. He's coming back soon, from what I understand, but I don't know how imminent that is. And they are now losing JT Miller over some off-ice issue. Not really clear what's going on there, but still a pretty strong team. Probably a playoff squad. I don't know that they'll go deep, but for Vancouver Canucks fans, I'm sure it's better than the alternative. The Flames, I think, are just happy to be there. I'm sure that they're loving life. They were expected to be among the worst in the league, and they haven't been. They're ahead of the Oilers, so I'm sure they are thrilled about that. Vegas and LA, I mean, they're just good teams. Vegas in particular is annoyingly good. I will say that, against the Jets, I thought Winnipeg had a decent run against them for part of the game, and then, Vegas still just ended up winning out. But, another team that I don't want to see in the playoffs. I don't want to see them again. Please, I can't do another conference finals loss to Vegas. I am so tired of seeing the stupid team in the postseason. The Kings would be at least a little more manageable, but they did embarrass the Jets defensively that one time. So I don't know. I keep saying I would be more comfortable playing X team, and they've also embarrassed the Jets at some point this season. So yeah, there's only a handful of teams that I feel like the Jets really don't want to face in the playoffs. And I don't know that I count LA among them. But at the bottom of the division, you've got Edmonton, Seattle, San Jose, and Anaheim. I guess the only team that's maybe a little surprising is Edmonton, but given the departures and their roster changes, I don't think it's that shocking. They have been playing much better recently, so I don't know that the record's going to stay like that. They might move back into, third or fourth here pretty soon in the division. But yeah, I mean, it's just you look at these teams, right? And there's maybe two or three that I think are really, truly amazing. And then everyone else is just kind of in the middle of the pack. And I'm still trying to figure out where I put the Jets. But hopefully I get to put them back at the top of the Central here pretty soon. I think, Winnipeg's recent form is not indicative of who they truly are. I think a lot of this is schedule stuff. But by the same token, you've played bad hockey recently. You did kind of deserve to be on a 4-game losing streak. It's time to turn that ship around and get things going again. That's why having that, 18-win run so far at the start of the season is pretty dang helpful. So let's just hope for some better tides for the Jets here pretty soon. But let me know what you think about tomorrow's game. What are you expecting to see? Do you think the Jets are going to turn it around in time before the holiday break? Drop your thoughts and comments below or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that is all the time that we have. I thank you so much for listening and making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. We'll see you back here tomorrow with action from Winnipeg versus Buffalo. Let's hope it is a good one.